Well, hello there. My name is Tommy Lee Cassidy, and this is the Right Wave of Liberalism. Now, and I also wrote the manifesto of such a name also. Yes, so let's begin. Today we are talking about something quite interesting, and that's hate speech. Protecting minorities, or is it silencing Britain? In Britain today, a man was arrested for teaching his dog to do a Nazi salute. It's a joke. Frankly, I don't agree with that by any stretch of the imagination. But does one have to silence that speech? Another was investigated for tweeting about biology. I mean, this is just simply absurd, right? I mean, welcome to the world where the hate speech laws just simply are normal day interactions of who we are. And as well, now the government, due to the Online Safety Act, can do non-hate, crimes that, you could be arrested for, it's horrifying in so many questions. The question is, are these laws protecting the vulnerable or punishing people for saying the wrong thing? And that is key. What do we consider to be wrong in this context? It is whatever the government decides it to be. As I referenced in my earlier video, the fact remains is that, is this right? Or is this just the world we live in today? I mean, the fact remains is we look at what hate speech laws really are. And, we are going to look at what hate speech laws really are and how they're being used, and why, as myself, a classic libertarian, will offer a better way forward. Right? So, hate speech is not clearly defined in law. Thought you might wanted to know this. In law, it includes speech that is abusive, threatening, or insulting if it incites hatred. But what it counts as hatred. Intent is often irrelevant. If someone feels offended or harmed, could be criminally liable. This is ridiculous. Same as a non-hate incident, which, by the way, is what's in the Online Safety Act, which is in itself horrifying. See, the price of liberty is the freedom to offend. Maybe I've misquoted that from Mills or Orwell, but that is the point, and I'll repeat that. The price of liberty is the freedom to offend. Now, Count Dankula, as he is known online, it was a joke of a dog doing an exorcism, and that is in itself ridiculous. Some find it funny, some didn't, but to assume that it is wrong is simply just ridiculous. Considering, if I remember correctly, the great and amazing comedian John Cleese did that in his program doing a Nazi salute. Are we suddenly to ban that as well? It's getting ridiculous. He was charged and convicted under the Communications Act of 2003. Again, this is getting ridiculous. What is constituted as hatred is by definition the hardest thing to judge, and it is so out there that how is one supposed to truly understand what he can and cannot say in a nation that, as Keir Starmer put it so potently, we have always had free speech and we continue to do so. What's free speech? Free for the government to decide what it is, but again, that's my opinion. And the courts did admit, by the way, Count Dankula, that it was a joke, but still punished him. What society are we living in where that seems to be perfectly reasonable? And so what message does that give? Intent doesn't matter, only interpretation. Let's talk about Harry Miller. The ex-police officer tweeted satirical comments about gender ideology. He was visited by the police. His tweet logged as a non-crime hate incident. That's the one I was trying to say. Non-hate crime incident. Are we joking here? I mean, what is defined, if it is non-crime, well, if something is a non-crime, how can a crime then be ensued from a term that literally says in its statement, a non-crime hate incident? We're living in a dystopian, reality here. I mean, as he quoted, we're in danger of criminalising thoughts. I mean, what happens to a society that we cannot think but to do? And if we cannot think, then therefore we become lesser to what we are. We become shells to the state, and merely sheep moving unopposed, with no incitement to think. And if we're no longer to think, then how are we to act? Caroline Farrell, arrested for misgendering online. This wasn't violent. It was her expressing religious belief and personal views. How are we living in a society where an individual, man or woman, can be arrested for saying the truth, as the NHS has defined and the Supreme Court of the UK has defined, that there is two sexes, male and female, nothing else. This isn't my belief as a Protestant, though that is irrelevant what my personal beliefs are. We have to look at this on truth and reality. There are only two sexes, and frankly, if you're offended, then we live in a society where your offence somehow outweighs facts. I mean, the fact is, these aren't extremists. These are only ordinary, perfectly rational Britons being policed for opinions. And something tells me it burrows further down than that, simply because, well, it isn't what the government wants you to say. Now, I could give my own opinions on the matter, but we'll hold it there. Now, this new Islamophobia law, it is literally modern blasphemy legislation. This exposes dangerous implications of the APPG's proposed definition. In 2018, the APPG on British Muslims proposed defining Islamophobia as a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. That is the most vaguest interpretation that anyone could hold. This sense of, oh, well, it's somewhat like Muslims, so therefore we're not allowed to discuss it. Can we do the same about Christianity? Can we do the same about Judaism? Though the left seems to be wanting to do it to Judaism and Christianity, but not Islam? Is Islam defined as a race that has been harmed too much? Well, in what context? And I mean that in a way of like, if Judaism, the Jews were harmed so significantly in the 20th century, to a degree that arguably no other religion had been treated in such an act in the modern age. Sure, it is definitely true that the Catholics got that under Rome, and the Crusades in general were a mishmash of Catholics oppressing Muslims and Muslims oppressing Catholics. You can't put modern day delusions onto the past. I mean, the fact remains is even critics have warned this criminalisation, criticism of Islam is a belief system, not just anti-Muslim bigotry. Now, as a classic libertarian, people deserve protection. Ideas do not. And I want to preference that. People deserve protection, but ideas do not. By this definition, criticising Sharia law, which if I'm not mistaken around 40% of Muslims believe that should be in Britain, quoting controversial verses from the Quran, like the simple fact that Muhammad had a 9-year-old wife, discussing Islam's role in politics or history, and all potentially criminal. I just don't understand the logic. My question is to you, what do you think? I mean, I'm just laying out the facts. I'm not really particularly giving my own opinion. I mean, the fact remains is, would we accept a law saying criticising Christianity is racist, even though we have our own religion? It's called the Church of England, founded by Henry VIII. Whether you agree with its foundation or not, we have a religion. And as well, it's very strong, similar to Mormonism, which is very strong in the north. Not to the same extent as it used to be, but it is a point to be making. And then we get something that is just ridiculous. The Banter Law. When jokes become crimes. This is a level of absolute absurdity and literally a danger of over-policing humour. I mean, what's going to happen now? That satirical comedy for satire and everything like that is therefore not worth discussing? This is ridiculous, right? In 2024, proposal aimed to criminalise banter that caused psychological harm, even if unintended. Welcome to British culture, where banter is literally who we are and what we are. We banter with each other because it helps us get through the darkest days and the darkest nights. Through horror and situation of which the world has ever seen, it is how we survived as a nation. It's to find humour in everything and help ourselves. It is who we are, so why are we ruining that? As I said, comedy clubs, social media, WhatsApp groups are all at risk for this. Right, with the action of the Online Safety Act, where now the government can now pry into all your personal DMs, right, your direct messages, with no governmentally legislation, no judges or anything like that presiding over that case. And then all of a sudden now they can not just do you for anything that you've said online, even in private DMs, but also criticise you for bantering and criminalise, get out. If the state decides what's funny, only the powerful will laugh. Let me re-emphasise that. If the state decides what is funny, only the powerful in this nation will laugh. In the days of old, that was the upper class. But what is the upper class today? It is politicians. It is media. It is individuals that have obscene amounts of power. And yet the left keeps crying about taxing the rich. But who has more power in Britain? The rich or the ideologues? And again, this isn't a defection on the left, because I am left-wing. It is time we retake back what the left has left to the sunder, the erosion of the pillars of what made us liberal in the first place, and bring back the sense of modern liberalism, and bring back the sense of classic. Because classical liberalism is literally the foundations of the state of which we are in, and we are literally riding on the bones of those of old, like Gladstone and Mill, to basically throw ourselves in a society where they disguise the hold of liberalism while it's basically just a husk. And to further on this, classic liberalism was built on tolerance, debate, and emphasis on that word debate, and freedom of expression. It wasn't the idea of being able to say whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. It is the freedom to express yourself, which is now especially in the helms of the corridors of Westminster. As Mill put it so passionately, the worth of a state in a long run is worth of the individuals composing it. Essentially means that the state itself must prioritize individuals rather than being taken over by it. You don't protect minorities by silencing majorities. You empower everyone. And I want to emphasize this. You empower everyone by protecting liberty equally. The idea of positive discrimination, DEI, is literally the antithesis of what a classic libertarianism is. And frankly, it is destroying who we are. As Orwell most famously put it, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Are we even allowed to do that anymore? Questions lie upon what needs to be done, and it's horrifying what needs to be said. Enforce niceness creates moral laziness. People stop thinking, they just obey. As I said, they become a shell of their former self. They are literally sheep to the herd, being bitten by wolves. It is horrifying. Liberty is the safeguard of all. The issue isn't whether hate speech is ugly, because it is, and often is. The issue is who gets to define it, enforce it, and punish it. Because this is the issue. Why would you give hands or powers to a state that believes itself to be protecting others, while itself proliferating its own crimes allegedly? It's horrifying. Today it's Nazis and trolls. Tomorrow it's conservatives, feminists, atheists, Christians, comedians, and you or I. For expressing the simple truth that we are free, or at least we should be. If we allow emotion to dictate law, we sacrifice reason. And once reason is gone, liberty dies. Classic libertarian doesn't say everything goes, it says the state doesn't decide what doesn't go. And let me re-emphasize that. The state doesn't get to decide what doesn't go. But as I said, doesn't mean everything goes. You protect those. But there's a difference in protecting and blanketly doing so. Let the bad ideas speak, then crush them in debate, not in court of opinion, not in courts, because that's how you build strong, free, confident society, not one afraid of jokes and opinions. God bless, good night, and thank you for listening to the Right Wave of Liberalism. In the description below will be my manifesto. God bless, and of course, good night.